All right, welcome to the 9 p.m. conversations. It's me, Prashant, and I have Lokesh with me here, and we'll continue with our conversations about Mahabharat. Uh, Hi, Lokesh.
Hi,
I'll
Prashant.
quickly recap what we covered in the last session. Last session we discussed about the various aspects of Mahabharata, but one thing that came out was that the final large battle was very different from several battles that had happened before the great 18-day war. That was one of the critical things. The other interesting thing that emerged was that when we are talking about who would be the king in that world, in that context, then the ability to govern or how that person is in terms of being an administrator or the things that we talk about when we are talking about administrators or rulers in this day and age, like what would be the impact on the economy, what would be the military impact, what would be the impact on science and technology, education, health, none of those things were relevant at that point of time, were not talked about. Lokesh, if I have missed anything, please fill in and then let's get started.
So another thing that we discussed probably, which is equally important, is that the maps don't change.
The
So when
maps
we
don't
have,
change.
even before the 18-day war, we have what we can call skirmishes or battles. And if I'm
Mm-hmm.
not wrong, there are probably only three instances. We talked about two at that time. There are three instances wherein there is some change of maps. The
Uh-huh.
first is when the Pandavas defeat Panchal on at Drone's behest as Guru Dakshina,
Bronze bears. Mm-hmm.
and the kingdom of Panchal is split into two, and Drone is given half of
Mm-hmm.
it. The second is, not, this is not very clearly spelled out, and I don't know much about it, but I am speculating here, where Karna is made king of Ang. We talked about it, but that's also, if we imagine it in a way, is a change of the dynastic or the map model.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the third is obviously the split of the division of Hastinapur into two, Indraprastha and
Mm-hmm.
Hastinapur, wherein
Mm-hmm.
Kauravas and Pandavas are given part of it, and then
Mm-hmm.
that happens. And in at the end of the war, if we look at what happens,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the war, two things happen. One,
Mm-hmm.
Yudhishthir is proclaimed as the king. He succeeds
Mm-hmm.
Dhritarashtra. So the succession is
Mm-hmm.
clear and he succeeds Dhritarashtra. Second, the map is, or the structure of the map is completely destroyed. Panchal goes
Mm-hmm.
back to Drupad, Karna is dead, and I would imagine that's the end of Ang as a kingdom, and Hastinapur is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reunited as one.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this takeaway also. And just I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it. So in some sense, this takeaway is what we see in modern, in our times today, wherein the map of the world really does not change too much.
Does not change. Uh-huh.
And there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of forces which try and prevent map changes. So map changes do
Mm-hmm.
happen. We have seen the balkanization of Europe and the split there, or the split of USSR. But by and large,
Mm-hmm.
the maps don't change, and smaller countries don't get gobbled up. They remain independent. There are skirmishes. There are some issues. There are succession, or there are regime changes. Even in the case of the recent ones like Iraq and Libya and Egypt, there have been regime changes,
Mm-hmm.
but no map changes really
Regime
so far.
changes. No map
But no
changes.
really map changes. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, we had the famous Gulf War wherein the US intervened and kind of ensured that that did
Prevented the
not
map
happen,
change. Yeah.
prevented the map change. We have had short durations war, the 7 day war between Egypt and Israel and all that. Again, very marginal map changes where in some parts of that, very marginal disputed territories were there.
Mm-hmm.
So one takeaway could be that this is hard. At least when I think about it, and maybe a lot of us when they think about it, is it's hard to imagine in the era of monarchy and kings where we think that the maps were inherently unstable.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So what the Mahabharata is saying, and there is another aspect that is very strong in both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, that whenever you are describing a king or a dynasty, you go back like aeons and ages and say, okay, this was this and this and this. There is a huge narrative of their whole history.
Mm-hmm.
Something that just I couldn't understand. Now put it in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the message out there is the stability of the map. That if this
Mm-hmm.
dynasty has been there in say the Ikshvaku dynasty of Ayodhya in the case of
Ram.
Ramayana, or what we talk about the Kurus in Hastinapur or anybody else. So what you're telling in
Mm-hmm.
some sense is giving a sense of a very, very strong or a very, very stable map that these dynasties
Mm-hmm.
have ruled for centuries or effectively perpetually. That's the message you're trying to suggest.
Mm-hmm.
So in some sense, that's the kind of the construct probably the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are also giving. So the same thing we
Mm-hmm.
saw in the Ramayana, there were no like we talked about in one of the discussions that there are no map changes.
No map changes.
Although Lanka is defeated, but it's Vibhishan who's crowned king. It's not Ayodhya who
Look,
conquers Lanka.
I find this idea of no map change particularly interesting because when we talk of national boundaries not changing in the today's context, when we talk of this no map change idea in the modern world, we are essentially connecting it to lack of wars. That wars are
Absolutely.
reducing, the number of wars is reducing. So
The cost of war is increasing. Economic trade
cost
is
of war
there,
is increasing, the instances of war are reducing, so no map changes. But
and
this we
democracy
are
is it's supposed to be also at the heart of it in some way or the other.
the democracy is supposed to be the heart of it. Now we are talking about a time when there is no democracy, there is monarchy. The people friendly face is non-existent, at least from the angle that we look at it now. That we don't talk of a welfare state, we don't talk of public education, public health, we don't say a king was great because he spent a lot of money on public education or public health. And we are talking about an era where war is, like we had discussed the other day, wars are actually a critical component of that system whereby they are preventing the decay of a particular kingdom and fueling innovation. So one is where war is at the centerpiece of the entire structure. We somehow achieve the no map change situation. The other one is we are saying wars are reducing in importance as a tool of uh, system changes, and still we are achieving the same thing of no map changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So,
so this is a very, very interesting question or a point that you are making, and over the weekend I've been thinking about this. And
mhm,
could it also mean that what the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, in some sense, represent is a fairly evolved and a late stage model of this, not an
okay,
early stage model? As it evolves, like today we see in a late stage, we have come to a model wherein the maps have stabilized.
mhm,
Wars,
okay,
if you look at the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and Ramayana again needs to be looked at in a slightly different lens, and we should talk about it once we come to innovation, because I think there is a lot of innovation story built into the Ramayana. That's at
mhm,
least my hypothesis, and we should talk about it sometime. Wars are becoming very, very, at least in the Mahabharata, the wars are for a very strong purpose. They are really not driven by greed or the typical human angles that we talk about. The
mhm,
human angles, if we can look at it, was what Drone did. He was driven
mhm,
by his humiliation and his anger and his that. And Drone is in some sense chastised for it in the Mahabharata. And he pays
mhm,
with his life.
mhm,
So in some sense, so from that angle that we talked about, that probably the genesis of it all, what probably the Mahabharata is talking about is a very evolved state. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
mhm,
I don't know,
mhm,
and that needs to again be evaluated. But it is trying to
mhm.
push us in that direction that wars, that everything has now become very, very stable. In some
Uh-huh.
sense, what the Mahabharata also talks about, because it talks about a fairly long period of time, starting from even the generations it talks about, from Shantanu till probably
Mm-hmm.
Parikshit and his son Janmejaya and all that. It's a fairly long generation, for 6 to 7 generations. There is no talk about innovation, there is no talk about technology change, there are no such mediums there. So it's probably
Mm-hmm.
also a message of stability and perpetuity, probably there.
Okay.
And in that sense, probably what the Mahabharata is giving us is a framework of how to live in that structure without violence,
Mm-hmm.
with violence just being where it is needed,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
and warning us that if we don't heed to these larger forces and these moral constructs and these things like succession and all that, we could get into
Mm-hmm.
a real soup.
So that in a way, according to you, is the central point of Mahabharata. That in a world where we have stability, relative stability in terms of technology and innovation, where we have political stability in terms of the boundaries of kingdoms are not changing. In that kind of a context, there is a certain way to behave and a certain right, or a set of best practices to sort of practice when it comes to taking critical decisions. If those things are followed, then we'll have minimum violence and everything will be taken care of. But if those structures or those best practices are violated, then it might actually lead to a massively destructive war.
And even more destruction than probably the normal scenario, which is why the 18-day war is is super destructive.
Uh-huh.
So you have more than the average violence happening there. So that could be
Mm-hmm.
also one way to look at it. That if things have stabilized, if
Mm-hmm.
innovation is not happening, or it's stable,
Mm-hmm.
how should the scenario look like? And I think these are interesting questions to be looked at, even in the context of where we as Homo sapiens or humanity are today.
Mm-hmm.
How would evolution lead to us? What kind of structures are we setting up? So, which is why
Mm-hmm.
I think the kind of answers that the Mahabharata is proposing and propounding, in
Mm-hmm.
a sense, are important to probably be understood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
that's
Makes
that's
sense.
in some sense a
How,
message that is coming out of it.
how do you connect to so one thing that I understand is, hmm, and the way we are building this argument is that the 18-day war is not the first instance of violence or battle or a skirmish in Mahabharata. There have been several battles, and most of them have been minimally violent battles. At times, we have the kings fighting, getting solved by one person dying. At times, we have very limited amount of fighting. But so we are presenting these two models. One is to solve problems, you still use war, you still use violence, but it is very, very limited, minimum collateral damage. Whereas there is this other example of a lot of destruction happening. I mean, generations after generations being destroyed. I think one of the central
Absolutely,
pieces of Mahabharata is that even the victors don't really end up gaining anything.
absolutely. There is utter destruction.
How do you look at that? I mean, do you think one of the central pieces of Mahabharata, because they present it with a lot of emphasis that even the next generation of Pandavas is finished.
Yeah. So again, I think they're trying to signify the enormous destruction that this kind of a scenario entails.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
not so that they don't make the victors as joyous victors. The victors are victors. But one theme probably the Mahabharata is trying to stress about, that the victory is not a joyful one.
Mm-hmm.
It's come at an extremely enormous cost, and the cost is that the next generation is completely wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
In some sense, the entire next generation, which is by when Abhimanyu's son dies in the womb and he's revived by
Mm-hmm.
Krishna, they're probably signaling that it's that much destruction that even for the victors, effectively all their generations were wiped out. They had come to their end.
True.
So what they're saying is, even as victors, there is not only enormous cost, as you say, but this has to be avoided. And probably at some level, maybe even as victors, you should have played that game along. So if you wanted to
Lokesh,
come into that,
I'll interrupt you. I just had a brainwave.
yeah, please.
We talked about, I mean, in one of our previous sessions, we talked about how Mahabharata does not look like as straightforward as Ramayana. We cannot say Mahabharata is a clear battle between good and evil. I think
Mhm.
I think this factor that the victors are also completely devastated. So maybe what we are trying to tell everybody is, please do not get into this kind of a war. Vis-a-vis, when it comes to Ramayana, we see that Lakshman does get injured, but that's nothing serious. He survives. Victors do not really have to pay any significant cost in terms of heroes dying, and victors are actually happy at the end of the war. So one message is that if you are confronted with evil, and if it is a Ramayana kind of a scenario, probably it is better to get into that battle and defeat the evil. Whereas when it comes to Mahabharat war, what we are trying to really say is that this kind of a battle is bad, whether you are on this side or that, whether you lose or win. So that also doesn't seem to be like a message you'd like to give if you wanted to present the war as the
Absolutely.
war between good and evil.
Absolutely. So when you talk about Ramayana, two important things that there probably in the war in the Ramayana is that Lord Ram and his army does not really suffer any named casualty in the whole war. So there is no hero who dies
Mm-hmm.
in the war,
No hero
which is
dies.
very interesting. Which is very interesting. So at one level we talk about Ravan and Kumbhakarna and Meghnad being extremely valorous kind of Yodhas and Maharathis and all that, but there is no casualty. So there's a clear contrast vis-a-vis the battle in the Mahabharata here. The second thing is
Mm-hmm.
that in the Ramayana, the entire generation of even the loser does not get wiped out. Vibhishan stays, is alive, and he's crowned king.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different kind of a construct which probably is being clearly being highlighted here. Vis-a-vis here, wherein there are losses on both sides. The losses are humongous.
Mm-hmm.
To some extent, the losses are complete and total. And what they are saying is, even as victors, probably you should have taken steps to have avoided this war. Maybe as
Mm-hmm.
if you had staked your claims earlier, maybe if you had refused to go in for the dice game, maybe if you had refused to do
Mm-hmm.
this,
Mm-hmm.
the problem could have been resolved. If there was a problem, and you also know. So even in some sense, I would say even the Pandavas are guilty of carrying the succession problem far too long. The
Mm-hmm.
problem simmered, and it's not that it kind of simmered in the open where everybody knew about the problem.
Uh-huh.
It's like a kind of a simmering thing which then finally blows up, and everybody
Mm-hmm.
kind of tried to turn a blind eye to it or push it under the carpet and hope that it goes away. In some sense, that's the
Mm-hmm.
context of the Mahabharata. So rather than,
Mm-hmm.
nobody is willing to take the problem head on.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Varnavath happened, nobody took the
Uh-huh.
problem head on. Neither did the Pandavas take it head on, nor did
Mm-hmm.
Dhritarashtra and the other guys take it head on. Probably, I would even imagine that the only guy who's trying to take the problem head on, and this might be a more controversial way to look at it, is Duryodhana.
Mm-hmm.
He's in a sense trying to solve it in his own way, which might be a wrong way to do it, but
Twisted
he's
way.
trying to solve it. The rest are, in
Uh-huh.
some sense, procrastinating over it.
Hmm,
To a certain
that's
extent,
a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point. What you are saying, and I'm just repeating, is that again hypothesis that probably what Mahabharata is trying to show us is that when succession is not clear, then that problem is a serious problem and you have to solve it. But you don't solve it, you just keep it festering, you let it grow as time passes. You try to do everything to avoid solving that problem. You will even go on an exile, you will go on an agyatwas, you will split the kingdom, you'll do everything possible
We are
to
willing to
avoid
accept even
facing.
Draupadi's humiliation to that extent. So probably
Yes,
Draupadi's humiliation is also
yes.
shown in that light, that you are even willing to accept that.
Uh-huh. But as long as you'll not solve that problem, it does not go anywhere, and the more you keep it festering, the more vicious the destruction is. Is that the point?
It's basically saying that this problem is a fundamental problem. You can't paper over it.
Mm-hmm. You can't
They're
you can't
saying
wish it away.
you just can't, because it's a fundamental problem in some sense. So if I reword what you said, what we're saying is here is a fundamental problem.
Mm-hmm.
This crack in this glass is fundamental. It will break. So this is a problem. Whatever you do, how many tapes you put over it, how much you want to wish it away, it will not go away. So better to solve it. And it's with that framework that everybody is really aware of this problem. It's not that people are not aware of it. I think we have lost Prashant. So let's just wait for a minute.
Okay.
So here
Looks like
I
some.
don't know.
Yeah.
So here again I will draw a contrast with the Ramayana.
Mm-hmm.
So in Ramayana, Ravan does not exist in the story for a very long period of time. He really comes into the story after Shupnakha's incident,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Mm-hmm.
like kind of half the Ramayana gone.
Mm-hmm.
So in some sense, Ravan is introduced as a problem that that occurs with Sita's abduction,
Uh-huh.
which is
Mm-hmm.
very different from the Mahabharata, wherein this problem is in the open. Everybody knows it from day one. You can
Mm-hmm.
structurally see this difference
Mm-hmm.
in a plot. This is something that everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows on day one in the Mahabharata.
Mm-hmm.
In the Ramayana, this is a
Uh-huh.
new event that happens at some given point in time, driven by something,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a
Mm-hmm.
clear reason for that or an instigation for that event to happen. The Shupnakha incident.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
structurally, these are very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what the Mahabharata is saying that everybody is probably to blame here. So the Pandavas may be righteous, but in some sense, which is why they have these losses, which is why the win is not such a joyous win. The victors are not overjoyed, are not happy at the end of it. They have suffered
Mm-hmm.
humongous losses. So that's the context in
Mm-hmm.
which we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's
Makes sense.
another
But
way. There is another way to look
yeah.
at it also. That we
Uh-huh.
talked about, that maybe the battle is not between a good and evil.
Uh-huh.
So let's make an assumption that, say, Duryodhan is not evil to start with, but there is this festering
Okay.
problem. There is this issue
Uh-huh.
that everybody knows that there is a problem of succession that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even Gandhari, when she hears of Yudhishthir's birth, remarks that
Mm-hmm.
there is a problem now. So at
Uh-huh.
the time of Yudhishthir's birth, everybody is aware. So at that point in time, a problem got triggered and everybody is aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a classical case where everybody is growing up together, but there is this lurking. There is this Damocles sword hanging on everybody's head.
Mm-hmm.
That's the case. And as it grows and as you live with it, obviously it starts affecting you.
Mm-hmm.
There are two
Mm-hmm.
sides of this. There is the Kauravs and there are the Pandavas. So if you look at it, the Kauravas are, because Dhritarashtra is the king, the Kauravas are the party who you can say who will lose if Yudhishthir is crowned king.
Uh-huh.
So they can be put in the corner which who will lose.
Mm-hmm.
The Pandavas, on the other hand, do not have the kingdom. That's the fact.
Do
So if
not have?
succession, a kingdom.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So if succession happens in favor of Yudhishthir, they are the
Mm-hmm.
gainers.
They are the
So
gainers.
keep this contrast in mind, and now start looking at their
Okay.
actions. So with
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
everything, the guy who has to lose will try harder to prevent his losses, and that is how
Mm-hmm.
with every cycle, Duryodhan is getting more and more sucked into this problem. His actions
Mm-hmm.
become
And
more vicious.
he's getting more and more desperate, and
Absolutely.
but this way of looking at it makes Duryodhan's actions a bit more understandable.
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at the modern thought, even a lot of modern management thought or psychology research or everything, a lot of it centers around fear of loss. It is almost established that fear of loss is a stronger motivator, much stronger motivator than the lure of gain.
Yeah.
Now, knowing that Duryodhan is driven by that,
Mhm.
it becomes slightly more understandable in terms of why he would try to do these desperate things to sort of
Absolutely.
prevent that loss.
To prevent that loss, and on top of it, who's his guide? Who's his mentor?
Shakuni.
Shakuni. Who's Shakuni?
Uh-huh.
Shakuni is Gandhari's brother,
Gandhari's brother.
and he's the younger son of the king of Gandhar.
Gandhar.
So, as part of the succession in Gandhar,
Hmm.
it's
He
Shakuni's
has.
elder brother who gets to be king, and which is why Shakuni has come and is staying in Hastinapur with Gandhari. So
Uh-huh.
that's also the context. So in some
Hmm.
sense, Shakuni represents for Duryodhan and for himself what will happen if they lose the succession.
Hmm.
Shakuni, in some sense,
That is
epitomizes that.
that is a great point. I think what we are saying here is that Shakuni essentially foreshadows Duryodhan's alternative future if Yudhishthir reaches the throne.
If Yudhishthir reaches it, in some sense, they will probably even get banished from here.
Uh-huh.
That is what really
Which
happened with Shakuni.
which happened with Shakuni. Mm-hmm.
So Shakuni plays that character there. Shakuni is playing that role of a person who in every sense is staying in a palace. He's got servants, he's got a good lifestyle, but from his own personal perspective he can see that difference, and
Mm-hmm.
Duryodhan in Shakuni can see that difference as to what it makes, what difference does it make.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. So Shakuni's presence constantly reminds him of the completely powerless, completely irrelevant,
Absolutely.
completely essentially a guest, a freeloader existence that
A
Shakuni has
freeloader
lived.
existence, from being probably the most powerful king in the country
Mm-hmm.
to instantly
Makes
becoming a
sense.
freeloader. That's the shift.
Mm-hmm.
That's the change. Second,
And
why
I
is
think
Duryodhan?
it's a stark reminder to Duryodhan. I mean, imagine living day in and day out with the future which you fear, the future of mine which I fear, and I'm made to live every day, every moment with that future of mine. I mean, anybody would do anything to avoid it.
And
His
that's how
actions become very very understandable.
that is that's the light in which we should see.
Uh huh.
So all their actions, what they end up doing, probably need to be seen in this light.
Mm-hmm.
So although they take steps to split the kingdom, what they're also showing in some sense that the step to split the kingdom really did not solve the problem. So again, these
It did
half
not solve
baked
the
measures
problem.
did not solve the problem. So they went to that extent. They split the kingdom. The Pandavas are again shown in a great light, wherein they accepted that jungle tract of land or that fallow land as their kingdom, built it out, they did everything, but it still didn't work out. And even in the Rajsuya Yagya, wherein this whole issue about their great the palace they had built, wherein Duryodhan probably
The
banged his head
uh-huh,
or fell into the
uh-huh.
lake, and at that Duryodhan was one of the people who was a key relative who was handling guests. He had been giving responsibilities, which the Mahabharata clearly. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not that as brothers they are off, but it is when this
Mm-hmm.
issue comes up,
Mm-hmm.
it is the implications are so stark for Duryodhan
Mm-hmm.
that it starts to play up. And
Uh-huh.
what the Mahabharata in some sense is telling us, that even if people have the right intentions, are good at heart, this problem is so fundamental that it will just flare up. It will eat you up. It will flare up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what in some sense is being talked about. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than putting it again on a remember we talked about that, is this a problem of agency or no agency? They're saying
Mm-hmm.
no. This problem is so fundamental that it surpasses agency. So Duryodhan in some sense does not represent agency. Duryodhan represents a fundamental problem.
Uh-huh. You're saying anybody else had there been anybody else instead of Duryodhan, the behavior would have been the same.
All we are saying is, in more cases than not, these it would have flared up to this extent.
Uh-huh.
You can't ever say it for a single case with definite probabilities, but all you're saying is that this kind of a problem will occur more often than not if we link it to it. It's not occurring because Duryodhan is evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental structural problem.
Lokesh, the and we'll come to this later when we reach that point. But one thing that I find very interesting is that we are saying that the central problem is the problem of succession. You can run from it, you can try to hide, you can try to do everything possible to not confront the problem head on. You split the kingdom, you do everything possible. But eventually, you have to face the problem head on and you have to solve those tough questions, the things that you are sort of trying to get away from. What is then the significance of Krishna's peace offer at the end? Why are we then saying? I mean, obviously, had Duryodhan agreed for 5 villages, as per this hypothesis, the problem would still have persisted.
No, what
And
it just says
uh,
is that because the same thing had happened. If you imagine, Khandav Pass was like 5 villages. So
mhm.
it's in some sense that thing had been tried before and it had failed miserably.
So then why is Krishna trying that again?
Again, it's in some sense maybe a projection to say, okay, we are trying. It is showing it is contrasting this. It's creating this doubt in your mind, which is what they are trying to show is that this is not about that. It's a fundamental problem. So even something that small
Hmm.
will not solve it. Let's try it out, but there are really no solutions. There are really no solutions.
Hmm.
And in some sense, probably if I go back, and which is where we said that the real clairvoyant of this whole story is Satyavati's father.
Satyavati's father, yes.
Then the problem is what probably the Mahabharata is saying, that this problem is not solvable. This problem
Hmm.
is best that it did not occur. So take steps that this problem does not occur. So like Satyavati's father takes that step so that this problem does not occur. He's
Hmm.
categorical at the outset to say that this is what I want. This is what it
Hmm.
implies. So it's saying be that clear in your thought process, because once you get into that trap, probably there is no solution. maybe another way to look at it is that what the Mahabharata says, there is really no solution. You
And
might say that
just
the Pandavas were lucky and they escaped Varnavat, but those are the only
uh-huh,
solutions. Those are in some
uh-huh.
sense the only solutions. So in some scenarios, maybe somebody would be lucky that in Varnavat the problem gets settled. But this is the path you will continuously go towards.
So
And
are we saying, yeah, go on. I'll,
it is a
yes,
problem
please go
that
on.
you
Yeah,
should take immense care that it just doesn't arise. And
doesn't
that is
arise. So
probably what Satyavati's father states very, very clearly.
that's one way you solve the problem, by not letting it happen.
And it is just as a second. So another thing, why is Bhishma such a central character?
Uh-huh. Bhishma, interesting.
Bhishma in some
Are
sense
we
represents the solution.
are we saying that Bhishma represents the alternative future? And I know the word, using the word future here is discrepancy, because Bhishma happened before Duryodhan. But if we sort of compress the time scale, are we saying the options in for Duryodhan are either you go the Bhishma way, or you go Shakuni way, or
So
you
they are
fight it
not the
out
options
and
for Duryodhan. These are not the options for Duryodhan. Because the
uh-huh,
problem has
Bhishma.
occurred at Bhishma.
Okay.
What they're saying is that it might look unfair for what happened with Bhishma.
Mm-hmm.
It might look unfair. But if you now look at it from what happened in the Mahabharata and the 18-way war, it maybe
Mm-hmm.
was a very small price to pay for Bhishma.
Mm-hmm.
It represents the solution. Bhishma probably represents the solution, and in some sense, the death of Bhishma is the point wherein the everything gets unraveled in the battle till Bhishma is alive is not that ghastly.
Mm-hmm.
The heroes are not dying. The death of Bhishma, or his going on the Sharshaya, he does not die. He's going on the
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
his falling is the falling of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything is unravels. So do you want to protect the structure, the system, the processes, or will you give into the wishes of a single guy? Or is a single guy, Bhishma, with his one pratigya, solves the problem?
Mm-hmm.
So in some sense, with the story repeating itself, we have
Mm-hmm.
been shown a solution at the outset.
We've
So this is
even
in some sense a very strange story wherein the story repeats itself. The first time the problem does not occur because there is a clairvoyant, as I'm calling him, Satyavati's father. There is one guy who has to pay the price of it, which is Bhishma, but the problem gets solved. That's what we have seen.
mm-hmm. Nice structure. I think we can draw a lot of lessons about story structure from Mahabharata. But one more thing, does when Duryodhan refuses Krishna's peace proposal, has he decided that eventual the time for the final solution has come, and the solution has to be this: either I live or the other person lives? Like, has Duryodhan has the clarity dawned on Duryodhan, like the clarity had dawned on Satyavati's father?
Maybe it's just heat of the moment and the incessant the issues going on for years and years, that probably everybody's tired and they don't want to get back to it. They've seen what's happened, plus maybe a lot of ambition now thrown in. He's been in
So
that
so
power.
you.
What you need to also understand is that, like we said, a loser and a victor, and a gainer.
Hmm.
Duryodhan
Hmm.
has been like the crown prince or the de facto king for a while now.
Hmm.
So it's not that the kingdom has a void, it's that Duryodhan. So it's not that two outsiders are fighting for it. In some sense, Duryodhan is the de facto king. He's running the show, and
Hmm.
he's running the show for a very long period of time. So look at
So the
it from
last, I
that
think,
lens.
uh-huh. I think 28 years. They had 2 rounds of exile.
Then one round of exile.
1 round of exile. Still
One after
14, 15
Varnawat,
years.
which was a small thing which ended with Draupadi Swayamvar and they came back. And that one
Hmm.
round of exile.
1 round of exile.
So it's a fairly long period of time.
Fairly
So
long
in
period of
that
time.
context, you need to probably see these things.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, how does he look at his chances? He's probably fairly confident. He's the guy who has resources. So maybe a lot of things going in there.
So you don't want to attribute any special wisdom to Duryodhan. More like he is being driven by ambition or just fed up with this same problem
It
persisting
could
for
be.
so many years.
I would probably guess that incident does not have too much significance. It's probably a very routine kind. It's like Ram sending a doot or a messenger, first Hanuman and then Angad to Ravan, and they're getting spurned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe a
You
very
you don't
procedural kind of a thing.
you don't see a lot of meaning in that particular incident.
I that's how I'll probably read it.
Okay.
So we see the same
Mm-hmm.
thing in the Ramayana, the two incidents, especially the second one, when Angad
Uh-huh.
goes after
Mm-hmm.
the army has crossed, wherein that was the biggest thing for Ravan, that who can cross over to my side, no army has come this side. And now he sees that. He knows Vibhishan is on the other side. He's seen
Mm-hmm.
Hanuman's Velar. He knows
Mm-hmm.
Ram had defeated Khardushan and killed them. So given all that knowledge, he just probably just in the heat of the moment and probably also the continuity of the story. Because
Mm-hmm.
if this peace offer had been accepted, then one probably from again the construct of the story would have remained incomplete.
The story would have remained incomplete.
So again, they would have had to have another maybe dice event or something else to.
Mm-hmm.
The story couldn't have had a closure.
Mm-hmm.
So which is why I think it's very procedural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So so we are saying that a couple of very interesting things that one lesson of Mahabharat probably is that don't get into such a war, which I find very strongly brought out. And we at the beginning of the story we are given like we just talked about Satyavati's father, the Fisher King. He somehow anticipates the whole thing and presents a very elegant solution of the problem. That you don't let the problem arise, one person pays the price, but obviously, as we later see, one person paying the price is infinitely better than there being all round destruction.
And this is also highlighted, if I remember rightly, Gandhari remarks, which I mentioned a little earlier, that when Yudhishthir is born,
Mm-hmm.
so everybody knows it. So it's not that this is such a complex theorem to be solved that it will be hard. Everybody knows it, that now between Dhritarashtra and Pandu, the way it got solved, that first Pandu became king, then Dhritarashtra became king. There is confusion here. We need to resolve it. So either make it very clear here that now with Pandu you are going to the,
Mm-hmm.
let's solve it. Maybe another angle that probably I might add to it here is, why does Pandu go to the forest?
Mm-hmm.
Pandu goes to the forest because of that curse, the Brahman's curse.
Because of that curse. Mm-hmm.
So which means that in some sense, maybe the assumption is made that he will not have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So if he does
But
not
he
have
goes
kids,
goes there with his wives.
but it said that he cannot be intimate with them. The moment he
Uh-huh.
gets intimate, he will die.
Mm-hmm.
So implication being that he cannot have kids.
Mm-hmm.
So in some sense, with Dhritarashtra's crowning, based on this incident, there is no problem at this point in time.
Uh-huh.
At
So
this
in
point
fact,
in
okay. So so one question that arises is, so, if I just try to sort of reiterate what we discussed, we are saying Pandu becomes the king, but he has that curse. So he goes to the forest. The implication is that he will not have sons, so that the succession problem will not arise.
so there
And
will
we
be no
have
two lines of
Dhritarashtra,
succession.
no two lines of succession. And then we have Dhritarashtra in the capital, and he is living the life of a grahast, a king, and he has sons who will eventually succeed.
Become kings. Maybe that's
Is
the
that the
assumption.
implication? Uh-huh.
I'm just trying to highlight something. I don't know, speculating, but there is this angle to it very very clearly. And then,
Why
which is
doesn't
why,
uh, the question is, why doesn't the succession question arise between Dhritarashtra and Pandu?
so it arose wherein it's always, which is why Dhritarashtra always held things against Vidur, because Vidur intervened and said that a blind king should not be crowned king if there is somebody more capable there, which is Pandu.
So we are saying that the eldest son rule is not hard and fast. It can be
It
compromised
is hard
in
and
certain
fast, but
situations.
because in such a case they intervened, or maybe that's the error they did.
Because if blindness rendered Dhritarashtra incapable of being the king, he eventually ends up ruling the capital for 15 plus
Absolutely.
years.
So eventually he comes back and does that. So again, there is this chaos that they have caused. So maybe the message there is that Vidur was probably wrong. If
Hmm.
Dhritarashtra had been crowned king first,
There would not have been any problem.
there wouldn't have been a problem. So just don't be smart. Again, probably with that they are giving that other message that it does not
Okay.
matter whether the king is a good king or a bad king, a blind king or a non-blind king. Succession is better. Maybe that's the message there.
I think it adds up. If we are saying it absolutely adds up. We are saying that the entire problem happens because we like you said, we try to be smart. We say, okay, the eldest king is blind, so let us get some other person. And then once you do that, you've sown the seeds of the problem. What we are
Let's own
essentially
the
saying
seeds
is,
of the problem.
just stick to the simplest Occam's razor solution of eldest son becoming the king, whether he is blind or whether he is
Which is also
incapable or
consistent
whatever.
with the fact that we're not looking at governance and those things,
Governance and
which is
the
also
capabilities.
highlighted by the fact that actually Dhritarashtra has a fairly long rule as the king.
Fairly long rule as a king. So
So it also
obviously
is
Vidur
evidence to say that maybe Vidur was wrong. The fact that
is
Dhritarashtra rules for
uh-huh,
such a long period of time is really evidence to say
that
that
Vidur was
Dhritarashtra,
wrong.
that Vidur was wrong. And maybe that's the problem, that you tried to be too smart. Maybe you created the problem. Maybe that's the one of the possible interpretations. You created a problem when there was none. Had
Uh-huh.
Dhritarashtra been sworn as king,
Mm-hmm.
then there would have been no issue.
So are we saying that the central problem of Mahabharata actually gets created by Vidur when he crowns Pandu instead of Dhritarashtra?
Possibly that could be one
Mm-hmm.
way to look at it, and hence now probably we have an answer to the problem,
Uh-huh. Which is
which is that Vidura shouldn't have done that. So
uh-huh.
this is not a problem. So probably what the Mahabharata, if you look at this interpretation of it, what the Mahabharata is saying, that this was such a simple problem to be solved. You created the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You created the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you such simple rules. I gave you such an elegant model. You screwed it up.
Mm-hmm.
If you had just
So what
followed it,
I think this is very interesting. This ties in with our idea that structure is
agency,
better than
structure.
no structure. It also ties in with the idea that the king does not matter. What we are saying is Just be clear. Just have clarity, accepted clarity. Who will be the king? Even if you put a monkey on the throne, it still does not matter.
We're still putting humans, not monkeys here, so it's still better off. But
I
there could
like
be one
I like
possible reason. Yeah?
I absolutely love this angle. What we are essentially saying is solve the problem using a framework. Don't try to solve the problem using individuals. And at least in this case, we are actually saying, very, very actively saying, that ignore any shortcomings that you are seeing in that person. If the
Or we are
framework
basically
is
saying
solving the problem,
don't go for what in a mathematical, don't go for the local maximas.
don't go
Don't
for the
try.
local maxima.
So maybe what maybe has never been shown as somebody who had evil at heart.
Uh-huh.
So he's always been shown as good meaning, well-meaning person. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you over optimize
You over optimized.
and you screw up.
Mm-hmm.
A classical lesson from history, maybe.
Classical
Maybe a way,
lesson from history.
well, at least
Uh-huh.
before we started this discussion today, I at least did not have this in my mind.
Mm-hmm. And do you see any significance? What I find, again, now I obviously did not have this idea in my mind, and in fact, in all our discussions about Mahabharata, I never looked at it from this angle. And suddenly, I find this thing also very interesting, that all the three of them, Vidur, Dhritarashtra, and Pandu, have a single father. Now, this may just be a coincidence. Eventually, we may realize that it has absolutely no significance. But I
Mm-hmm.
find it interesting
Mm-hmm.
that actual problem of Mahabharata gets created with this generation.
Mm-hmm.
The three of them have a single father, same
Mm-hmm.
father, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what we are, one way to look at it is that over optimization or trying to tinker too much and trying to apply too much of your smarts in that system just messes things up.
Follow the process. Process is king.
Follow the process. Process is the king.
You
Mm-hmm.
you try and optimize. Maybe that's one way to look at it.
It would
Satyavati's
have
father
been Satyavati's father did something
followed the
like this,
process.
followed the process. And he sidestepped the process and things went for a toss.
So things went for such a toss. So, in some sense, maybe that's the kind of message we're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than look at story of greed, ambition, evil,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably what process failure leads to.
Mm-hmm.
And you ignore those warning signs, you ignore them.
Process failure, then obviously the problem gets escalated because probably nobody anticipated that such a thing would lead to such kind of a situation, which would eventually lead to such massive disaster.
Such massive disaster. And which is where we also contrast the two great wars, the war in Ramayana and the war in Mahabharata. Completely
Yes,
different play out of those wars.
completely different, and that is one reason why Mahabharata doesn't seem like a straightforward good and bad battle, because good and bad battle, we always, the hidden message, the implied message is that you should fight for the good, you should fight the good fight, you should, that's the central message. And
That's always the central
obvious
message.
and obviously you cannot give that central message when you show that even the victors are totally devastated and destroyed.
The victors are totally devastated. The second clue, probably in the Mahabharata, is that on the side of evil, so many good people are fighting.
So many good
Typically, when
people are
the
fighting.
final battle happens, like it happened in say, Ramayana, Vibhishan had switched sides before the battle.
Hmm.
So in some sense, that's how you would look at it. in the Ramayana, that the battle is being cast as a battle between good and evil is represented by Vibhishan switching sides. The
Mm-hmm.
good guy has come over, the gray has gone, it's black, it's white, let's fight.
Mm-hmm.
In Mahabharata, we don't see switching of sides. They stick to it. Whatever
Uh-huh.
reasons we give it to
True.
them, that they were true to the throne, Bhishma had taken a pratigya, Drona was this. The most interesting thing is the split of Krishna and his army.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did Krishna's army need to fight on the side of evil?
True. Makes
It
sense.
just, it just doesn't make sense. It also doesn't make sense that we have these incidents in the Mahabharata that when the war is about to happen, they kind of quote a lot of the kings on the other sides, and a couple of kings switch their sides from the Pandavas to the Kauravas and from the Kauravas to the Pandavas. If it's a clean black and white fight, a good versus evil fight, you will not have such things happening.
I missed the last part. What
I
was
think
it?
so. There were a couple of kings. I think so. Shalya and somebody else who
Mm-hmm.
switched sides
Uh-huh. Shalya
because
eventually
Duryodhana
became Karn's charioteer.
charioteer, and then the general after Karn dies. So a
Uh-huh.
couple of guys switched sides
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
switched sides
clear
in
black and
favor
white. You
of
don't do
the
that.
Kauravas, not in favor. So not like Yuyutsu who switched sides in favor of the Pandavas. That you can say, okay, you will switch sides in favor of the good,
Mm-hmm.
but switching sides in favor of evil, not a typical construct.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of these kind of constructs. We have Kripacharya and Kripavarma and Kritvarma there
Mm-hmm.
fighting those battles.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
appear to be the classical. So we have these. So if you look at it, we have these 2-3 incidents. We have Varnavat, we have the dice game. Basically, two incidents: Varnavat, the
We
dice
have
game,
that
and Draupadi.
Bhim. We have the Bhim wala story where he's fed that poisonous kheer and thrown
That
into
is like,
the.
if I remember my reading of the Mahabharata, that's just one line, and it's like,
Okay.
so it's described in that much part only. So
Okay.
we can ignore that part of it. That could be just some jealousy or some even food poisoning or something.
Mm-hmm.
The main two incidents being Varnavat and then the
B.R.
dice game with,
Chopra's Mahabharat had a longish episode of that.
yeah.
It
So
is
that
it is
that that
cinematic.
it's
Being
cinematic
thrown
and it's
underground and being found by
fighting them,
guards. It is
and
cinematic.
absolutely it's more cinematic. So from that perspective, you'll definitely make it that way. But
But
so
you are
that's the
saying
construct.
Vyasa's Mahabharat is just one line.
Vyasa's Mahabharata is just one line. And even if you
Mm-hmm.
look at actually, if you look at even the humiliation of Draupadi, there is
Mm-hmm.
no other such incident in the whole Mahabharata.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an incident out of place, and it is also an
Okay.
incident wherein Draupadi is largely claiming that to Yudhishthir, that when you staked, did you have a right to
Mm-hmm.
stake me?
Mm-hmm.
So Draupadi's pertinent question to Yudhishthir is not
Mm-hmm.
save me. It is,
Mm-hmm.
did you have a right to stake me?
Lokesh, do you want to talk about this tomorrow? Because I mean, one angle, one way to look at it is that if we look at the Draupadi incident from today's perspective, today's context, it obviously seems as something very reprehensible, something very diabolical, and perpetrators should be punished. We also have in the story, we also have Krishna's presence, who sort of restores her honor and all of that. But he does not kill any of those perpetrators. Whereas
He's not even
in
present in the
the
Sabha. Krishna is not there in the Sabha at that point in time.
he's not there. I mean, his presence is there. Okay, so maybe then this question. My question was
And
in
then
the
he explains.
Rajsuya
So
Yajna.
once they go out into the forest in exile, he comes and visits, and there is a very long passage where he explains why he was not there in the
Long.
Sabha.
Uh huh.
So there is a long
Mhm.
explanation that Krishna gives. So I think
My
this
question.
needs to be
Uh-huh.
looked more in light of the other discussion rather than being singled out as an incident.
Okay.
And which is why I think we should not discuss of more of it, because that is from today's context.
We look at it from today's context. True.
And anything we say about it will look very, very incorrect if we try and derive some meanings out of it in that
Mhm.
context at those times. It'll look inappropriate.
Mhm. 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 Fine. So we. Yeah. Yeah. You're saying something.
So I think the other things that we can look about in case of the Mahabharata today, maybe we can stop this here, and maybe like we talked about the Ramayana, maybe jump to the Ramayana for
Uh-huh.
maybe a session and that, and then come back to our question of monarchy. Maybe that's a system we
Let's
can
do
follow,
that. Let's do that.
because
Let's
here we have talked about succession, we have talked about stability, we have talked about those processes. So from the monarchical perspective, the questions we were looking at about, to some extent we have discussed them. Now the questions we are looking at are about human judgment, behavior, which are a different set of questions.
Uh-huh.
The structural question of how they construct the monarchical model and how they look at war and succession, that we have discussed, and there are some insights
Mhm.
we have there. Let's look at maybe
Fine.
what the Ramayana is telling us in this context.
Let's talk Ramayan tomorrow. Let's
Let's
talk
do
Ramayan
Ramayana,
tomorrow.
maybe a session or two, and then come back to the monarchical question.
Come back to Mahabharata. Good stuff, Lokesh. For me, the pay moment for today was that Vidur insight. I think, and we had a couple of them today. I mean, a couple of new angles that I got. I'll actually have to go through the whole discussion again.
Chalo, let's do
I
that.
I
Meet
really
up
enjoyed it.
tomorrow. Chalo,
Chaliye.
see
All
ya.
right. Thanks everyone. Thanks Lokesh. See you tomorrow.